Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 840. I had the black pieces. White started off with e4. I went e5, so we get a classical opening. He goes knight to f3. I go knight to c6. And now he goes bishop c4, the second choice after bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez, or Spanish game. This is the Italian game. And I play with bishop to c5, which you can see is the main move here. Knight to f6 is a very interesting way to play the two knights defense, but I've never played that myself. Actually, I prefer playing the white side against the two knights defense. So I've always just stuck with this bishop c5 move. And he goes for c3 here, which is the main line. b4, of course, is the Evans gambit, and d3 is just a quiet setup. All these moves, castles, these are all quite playable moves and interesting, but c3 is the main line. And after knight f6, the top choice these days, and the top choice in the database, but also the top choice among players, at the top levels, you see this position still at the top levels. They play d3 here, just shoring up the center. But the older way of playing, the exciting way of playing, is to play d4. And let's see, at what point? At some point, it gets classified as a Greco gambit. Greco is a 17th century Italian player, so the Italian game is probably named after him in part. That's the way they used to play it in the old days. Here, let's go back to the opening book. So the main move here is to take that pawn. And then the line I've played a lot with white and with black is the first choice here is c takes d4, bishop check, and well, knight to c3 is the old way of playing it, and then you can grab this pawn. Anyway, there's lots of interesting lines there. I did a video about the Italian game, and I focused mostly on that leading up to the Müller attack. But the other way of playing it after e takes d4 is to push this pawn to e5. And the one key move you have to remember in this position is you need to play the move d5. You see, it's practically the only move in the database, and this gives you a decent game. This idea also appears in the Danish gambit, so it's a good idea to have in mind if you play any of these e4, e5 types of openings when white is going for some kind of crazy gambit and has pushed the e-pawn forward to attack your knight. The counterattack on his bishop, if he's got a bishop here, is often the right thing to do. So I remembered that. I had only a hazy recollection of how this goes from here, so I wasn't too surprised when I took my knight, but that actually is quite an unusual move, and it's not good. It's actually, after he takes my knight, black is better, and I stay better the whole game, so it was not like it was easy for white to complicate things and get some advantage that way. So the main way of playing it, and this still leaves white with some edge, so this is a decent way to play. Bishop to b5. This knight now has to move, knight to e4, and then white can retake the pawn, and just retreating the bishop to b6 is probably best, although you could also play bishop to b4 check at that point. Let's see if the database has an opinion. Yeah, it likes white after that, whereas here it's about even. So anyway, this is as far as I followed it. It's an interesting position. You have this knight kind of stuck out here, and white has this advanced pawn that may be disruptive. But black has decent development. This knight is also going to perhaps trade itself off for this knight when it develops, so it's not going to be stranded here. It's not so easy to trap this knight. Although at the moment, you do have to be a little bit wary, because at the moment that knight has no squares to retreat to. So if white could somehow manage to move this knight out of the way and play f3, this knight might get trapped, but that's difficult to arrange. And while white is wasting time moving his pieces around trying to set that up, of course black can get some things going here. Maybe kick the bishop, move this knight, and and push the c-pawn forward to give this knight a square to go to. Something like that would probably be reasonable. Anyway, let's go back to the game. In the game, he played e takes f6. And after this, things are kind of forced for a while. I have to take the bishop, and then he can take here on g7, play rook g8. I'm going to just take that pawn back, and then there's different ways to play, but all of these ideas here for white leave black with some edge. As the chess engine is giving black somewhere between half a pawn and a pawn advantage at this point. So he went with bishop g5, and I went with f6. Maybe bishop e7 was a little better. I looked at this a little bit. Bishop e7. He could play queen e2. Oh, notice, by the way, we're really out of the opening book. Even if you follow this line, it just doesn't go any further. But just to check this out. Bishop e7, queen e2, and then just d3, kicking the queen. Notice that f6 can't be played in this line because he can just take it. So it doesn't. It can be played, but it doesn't accomplish anything. But on the other hand, black has saved this pawn. Black still has the bishop pair. Black can unpin with bishop to e6 here. And yeah, it's a position where black has good development. And even though the material is even at the moment, this pawn is probably going to get rounded up, and black will emerge a pawn up. So that's why this is good for black. I went with the other choice here, f6. Let's see, and then the line does continue with queen e2 check. After which I would block with queen e7, and then he could take, but I take. He takes. And then d3 check. So once again, I save this pawn, get a passed pawn here. And let's see, did I play it any further? Well, bishop g4. I just stopped at this point. Once again, well, let's see, in this line, actually, white has 4 pawns against 1. So he's got 3 extra pawns on this side, and I have 2 extra pawns on this side. So white is a pawn up. But once again, this pawn is going to get rounded up, whereas black's bishop pair advantage is going to persist throughout the game, and the chess engine is still giving black an advantage of somewhere between half a pawn and a pawn, even in this line. So, but that's probably the best that white can do out of this. Let's see, is there anything else there? Okay, yeah, he went bishop h6, and at that point we really are out of the opening book. And after this, actually, the chess engine is giving black almost a 2-pawn advantage. Now, I don't play the most accurate moves all the time, so the advantage varies the rest of the game between 1 and 2 pawns, roughly, for black. But basically, I was winning the whole game from this point on. So this is why you don't see you don't see this line being played where white grabs the knight. It's just not good. And as you saw in the video, even if I didn't find the best moves all the time, I was still able to find decent moves that keep an edge, so it wasn't too hard to play. Sometimes a position can be theoretically good, but difficult to play, but this wasn't too hard. So anyway, he blocked the check, I exchanged. I think getting the queens off helps black a lot. The one issue it might that black might have was this pawn is taking away some squares around the king, so there is potential for an attack, but a lot of that disappears with the queens off. And now here is an example of I played bishop g4, which I think is a natural move, but the most accurate move here apparently is bishop to f5, and let him take this pawn, and then black develops here, and this bishop comes in with check. King goes to e1. And then this bishop retreats to b6. I don't know if that's entirely convincing, but the chess engine in this line is giving black a +2 edge. So, you know, white's king is in the middle there, so it's interfering with his rooks getting into the game. I think that's one edge, and the other edge is the bishop pair. I guess I didn't really check this out. I kind of wonder why after bishop takes, he doesn't just keep taking, get rid of the bishop pair advantage. But maybe this knight takes with check is pretty dangerous. Yeah, that's what it is. This is the idea. Knight takes with check, and then where the king moves, and then the knight is coming here. So that's actually just winning the exchange. So he can't actually take that bishop at that point. So knight c3 developing, so his rook can move. Then I get this check. King e1. Oops. King e1 was the given move, and bishop to b6. Yeah, so this line that is best for black with a +2 edge by the chess engine. Anyway, I went with bishop to g4, which, as I said, it keeps a reasonable edge. He goes rook e1, get my king out of the line of fire. He gets his piece developed, and now I decide to... Oh, I throw in knight e5 here. Yeah, I thought I would pile up on this guy. He went rook 8 to d1. I guess he had nothing great he could do against it. And at this point, I finally decide to save this pawn and turn it into a protected passer, which will be a real asset in the endgame. I was sort of holding off on doing that move because I know he wants to play king f1 anyway, get his king out of the center and over to a little bit of safety, and so it sort of helps him to do that. But at the same time, it does give me this long-term advantage for the endgame. And now I just have to round up this pawn over here. The material at this point is actually even because white sacrificed a pawn in the center but managed to grab a pawn over here on the king side. But in holding on to this pawn, he's got this bishop out of play, whereas my pieces are active and I have the bishop pair. So this is still quite a good position for black. Let's see. Here I decided to start removing some material from the board. I take off that knight and then bring my rook to the e-file. He trades. I realized that, of course, he can't push the pawn. I can just come back and take with the rook again. And even here, I just keep trading. I think the fewer pieces there are, the easier this will be for me to win. And I had a few moments of doubt during the game, but I checked it out. It turns out I always kept the win in hand. Let's see. And here I just took off that knight, giving up the bishop pair advantage, but getting to a simplified endgame where I have the better pawn structure, and I'll have a one-pawn edge after I round up this pawn. So this is also a winning plan. Let's see. Oh yeah, it's my turn here. I went bishop to e7. I'm trying to maneuver my bishop over to take this pawn. Brings his king up to blockade. I go f5, so I can bring my bishop here. And he went b3. So that's a forcing move. I want to hold on to my protected passer here. So he traded. And then he went bishop to e3. And I don't want to give up this pawn on the queen side because then he would get a passer and he would have some counterplay. So I play a6. Chess Engine agrees with that decision. But that did give him a chance to maneuver his bishop around. So this is a pretty clever plan. So now I just want to show this idea. If I were to block with the bishop, he can just take it off and then queen. So I cannot come directly here after he plays this move, bishop to d4. I can't block it and try and win the pawn that way. What I could have done, though, is I could have gone bishop g5 check. This would have been maybe the simplest way to play and just round it up. So I kind of wasted a move here with king to g8. That's really not necessary. It's not defending anything that needed defending, and yeah, so that was a wasted move. I was probably moving too fast at this point in the game. Let's see, he went h3, getting his pawns under light squares, and I went bishop g5 check, getting my knight over, or my bishop around to the other side so I can attack over here and round up that pawn. So I wondered afterwards, after I had played this way, what if he had played f4 here? And this turns out to still be okay, although I might not have seen this idea, so that's why it would have been better for me just to go directly for bishop g5 and round it up this way. But this is still winning with this kind of clever sequence. So bishop d6 attacking this pawn, and if he defends the pawn with the king, then I have the bishop check. And of course, if he takes the bishop, then I push this pawn forward. And even though he has a dark squared bishop, he can't stop me from queening. He's not fast enough to get back. So he cannot take, or he cannot protect that pawn with the king. And if he protects with the bishop, then I go here. So So I'm winning that pawn anyway, I guess, is the point with this bishop d6 move. But that required some cleverness. And, if I continue to move quickly, I could easily let this game slip away. So it's really better to play that, would have been better to play that bishop g5 move check right here instead of king g8. Okay, but anyway, in this game, he didn't go for f4. He went for h3. Getting his pawn onto a light square, and now I can play bishop g5. And he drops his king back, and I round up this extra pawn. Let's see, he went bishop e5 here, and oh yeah, he's attacking my c pawn. I decided to save that because he's not managing to get hold of this pawn, so he just gave it up. I took with the bishop, and he went a4. And I went bishop to f8. Actually, that was another move that was played too quickly. I could have just taken on c3, and that would have been a quicker win. Okay, bishop f8, but this is all still winning. Let's see, he avoided the trade. And I went bishop c5, attacking this pawn. He went bishop to g3, defending, and then I started getting my king into the game. So I think this part is pretty straightforward. There was one other point where I was wondering if he had some idea. Yeah, it was right here. I'm marching my king up, and I have to come up on the dark squares. So I was wondering if he could play some trick like this, bishop to d8. But it turns out I can go to one of two dark squares. He can't protect both of them. And if I come here, then I can take this pawn, and then I'm grabbing this one. Well, he probably has to come back and defend, and then I can kick it with the pawn. So this would still work out in my favor. So he really had no better move than what he played. He just went back here with bishop g3, and I can kick it with f4. So he throws an h4 check, and then he drops his bishop back. And then I went bishop d6, just defending that pawn. Let's see, he went king d2, and I went king g6. I'm just going to come over here, round up this pawn, chase his bishop away, and bring the h-pawn through. So straightforward winning plan, and white resigned at this point. Anyway, interesting game. It's always fun to see those classical old-time gambits, and so that's maybe a little bit of how that should be played. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.